Hello, welcome. Um, Thank you for those who were already waiting. I'm really thrilled that some of you had decided to wait to be first in here. Um, I decided to do a live. Well, I've been talking about doing a live for a while, just because it's nice to talk to people directly, and also it's an opportunity for me to not be in like broadcast voice, which sometimes when I'm recording myself, I'm like, why do I have to talk like that all the time? But thank you for tuning in. Um, I want to talk to you guys about pretty much anything related to Eurovision, what we've seen so far, specific to the national selections as well, the ones that have already happened and the ones that have yet to be decided. And with this weekend, this one's a bit quieter than the last few that we've seen because every weekend it's been like 4 or 5 countries that have selected so far. Whereas this weekend, it's just two, and today specifically, it's just San Marino. Tomorrow we'll have Croatia decide, and obviously we've been seeing the what do you call them? The semifinals in Croatia as well. So yeah, it's definitely changed certain impressions about Dora as a selection. Unfortunately, it has kind of not lived up to expectations, which I mean, I think as I think about it, when because I've seen Dora just about every year, and one thing that I was overestimating was the technical setup, and I think that they've done certain things better this time around. We see fewer like massively overexposed shots, and it seems like they've at least been able to get their lighting down a bit better. But yeah, some areas in execution, and obviously when it comes to the fandom, there's really there's one choice, and then if it's not that choice, then people are gonna throw a fit. But please say hello if you're watching. Let me know where you're tuning in from, what your favorite songs are this year, so on and so forth. Hello to Alejandro, nice to see you again, and to Vincent F, who knows me from my Eurovox days. Howdy to you. So yeah, like really anything that comes to mind, feel free to shoot my way because I didn't really come in here with a specific plan apart from that, apart from just being like, let's see what's on people's minds. Um, Muffin Chips, hello to you. Everyone sounded off more or less. And yeah, so I mean, this isn't the only selection where that has happened. Benny Dorm, that was also an issue, and it's a real challenge when you're trying to talk about not that like it should be an expectation on my part to be like this is exactly how things are going to go, but when we're talking about artists that have participated in other musical programs and they clearly demonstrate that they have vocal abilities and stage presence, and well, stage presence isn't really the issue, but yeah, it's quite surprising when they get onto a national selection stage and it makes them seem a lot less experienced than they actually are. So that seems to be the case here, unfortunately. And yeah, that must be a playback issue. I'm not an audio guy specifically. I'm sure that somebody who has either worked on those kinds of programs directly could speak to that more specifically. But yeah, it's got to be something around that, around the artists not being able to hear themselves properly. And I mean, at the same time, like you can't discount as well that nerves play a factor. It can be, especially if people are responding very well to your song and they have very high expectations of you, that can play on people's minds. We see that all the time at Eurovision as well. It can sometimes play on people's minds to the point where it severely affects their performance, and then it feeds into this nasty cycle of, oh, this person can't sing, really, why were they selected, so on and so forth. But yeah, hello to Baltics Algodu. Algodu, nice to see you. Choice TK, hey, tuning in from Denmark. I like Lithuania, Belgium, and France so far. Nice. Yeah, and I would agree with all of those. Lithuania is currently like it's my jam. It speaks to me. It speaks to my musical tastes from like when I was very very young, and I mean like a child. But the aesthetic. Like I've always been into dance music, and what I really like about Lithuania is that it captures a bit of a nostalgic sound, but it does things in a unique way. It's not it's not like a bunch of these radio hits that are so obviously tapping into sounds from the late 90s, early 2000s, which is not a problem. I'm also a big fan of that, especially if they do it in a way that really hits those nostalgia bones, whatever, wherever it is that you feel nostalgia in your body. But yeah, that's one that I really enjoy. Hello to Mankinder. Hey Stu, are there any national final selection voting systems that you aren't a fan of, and why? Well, I will say it's hard to answer because I think that when it comes to the voting systems, there isn't a one size fits all solution. I mean, a lot of people have talked about the issues of Benidorm's as far as how this year we saw the televote winner in a semifinal be eliminated because they weren't as appreciated by the jury. And while like I am of the position that I don't think that song, I don't think the song really does enough to justify its position in the final. It is also a bit of a slight to the audience to not have the number one choice be selected. Yeah, I mean, I would have to think about it. There are some that come to mind that maybe make the selection not so exciting. Estonia is a selection that I've never, well, I mean, doing this channel, which I've only done, this is only my second year of covering Eurovision. I've never done the selection review of Estonia, and it's not because like I don't like the songs. I think Estonia's selection actually has a lot of variety, but what it ends up being is that it's usually not very exciting because early on in the process, when people are talking, they're usually talking about whoever's the most popular and they're going to win, and that has happened every year since I've been following national selections. The only time that it was a surprise, and I think it was because I was less in tune with the local audience in Estonia, was the first year that I followed, which was 2020. I thought it was going to be Yagu 100%, and it was Uku. That's that. But then the following year, I knew better, and then when everybody was saying, yeah, it's going to be Uku again, that's what happened. But I know, kind of different circumstances. But yeah, to answer that question properly, I have to think a bit more about that. I think ideally, since Eurovision in the grand final, it is ultimately 50-50. I think that having something that resembles that is probably the best at the moment. Whether or not the 50% that comes from professional juries is local or international, like obviously the idea in doing international juries is you see what appeals outside your own borders, and obviously that's worked very well for Melodifestivalen, for example, and a few others. But it's not like that's the secret, right? Every broadcaster needs to figure out the best way to resonate with their audience, to make sure that you're at least appeasing them as best as you can, because you can't appease everybody. It's just not going to happen. But yeah, it's like it's not as easy as I think people think it is. Yeah. Anyway, Alejandro saying, people shouldn't worry too much about flawed vocals in pre-selections with bad sound when everybody will go through SVT this year and will sound way better. Yes, I agree. The unfortunate part is that when we're talking about the selection itself and an audience that isn't necessarily as, when we're talking about the television audience, they're not as in tune as the rest of us are, where, we're following who are the favorites, and we have these very strong ideas about how things can do at Eurovision, which are not always right, by the way. I think that the challenge is that you still need to win them over, right? So I agree with what you're saying, and I think that we will expect better performances for whoever gets selected, regardless of how it went for them in their national selection. But at the same time, it is still a reminder to the broadcasters to sort out those issues if that's what it is, because it could, in fairness to them, it could just be that everybody is super nervous, and maybe that's not a matter of a technical problem. Maybe that's something in their process and sort of like the morale, because one of one of my very first lessons in college in television, in fact, this was my very first lecture, is that you will CERN, I'm already getting it wrong. You will very quickly realize that working in television is much less about working with equipment than it is with people. And that's the kind of thing that some people never really learn. And like, obviously, television has so much technology behind it, and it's obviously a big aspect of what you do. But you can have all the best technology in the world and have a team that is, you know, physically drained, emotionally drained. There's a lot more conversation now than there was then when I was taking, you know, when I was in college, around the work environments. And, you know, we've seen big TV shows, let's say like Ellen DeGeneres, for example, where, you know, we're getting an insight into what the environment was like behind the scenes and how that can impact people. So yeah, like, anyway, bit of a tangent, but I agree with what you're saying. Elliot Harris, looking forward to San Marino, more so because I know someone I know and help produces music. Aaron Sibley is competing. Oh yeah, that's cool. And this is his second time competing in a budget for San Marino, because I believe he came third the first year that they were doing it. Hello to Chilla ESC. My top: Lithuania, Vibes. Finland, Amazing NF Show. Norway, Mood. Czechia, not the live version though. Yeah. So with respect to Czechia, yeah, well, to keep it brief, I hope that she does not do the screech in in the live performance. You know, at the very end, when she's like, "Loving me more, loving." Please don't do that. But otherwise, I think there can be a lot of improvement with that song. And yeah. Hello to Lisu. Hi, I like your analysis and soothing voice. People say this all the time, which I which I find so surprising. I mean, like, it's not a like, everybody kind of has issues with how they sound, and like, at the end of the day, I overall, I'm pretty confident in myself. I'm very proud of the work that I do. It isn't to say that that I don't have my criticisms of myself, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But if that's all you see, then it's a bit of a problem. But it's the soothing voice thing that I think is really interesting, because, like, that no one ever said that to me until I started doing YouTube, and now I hear that all the time. Lewis, hello to you. I was wondering if you're planning to do a video on FTC this year. Yes, I really enjoyed your one last year. Also, are there any particular songs sticking out to you if you've listened to them? So about Festival de Canção, sometimes I do this, and I don't know why, because it is one of my favorite selections. But I think because this year I started on all the national selections fairly late, and yeah, like, it's been hard to find the motivation. I'm working 2 jobs at the moment, and you know, just things that are happening in the world and how they are affecting the show, how they have been affecting the show ever since they started. It's been not always easy to find the motivation to get into it. But specific to Festival de Canção, I have now listened to the songs as of last night. And while my hope is that next year it won't be as much of a struggle to get in, I would like to do an earlier video when the songs are released. And then usually what I do is, you know, what I did last year is I waited until after the semifinals. And I like to, when I can, when it's feasible to do so, I like to do videos after we've seen those live performances, because it's just, you could speak about things in more concrete ways. And when it comes to my, you know, the areas of knowledge that I have, like, I've worked in television, radio, film, digital media, and so when talking about a TV performance that we've seen, I feel like I can say things more concretely. And as much as I like love to talk about music, I you know, I'm a music fan. I've not made any music myself, and though I don't think it's necessarily incorrect for people who, you know, don't have that thorough knowledge of music. Many of you probably know Groot from Sweden, who, you know, knows lots about music, and he gets really into the details. And I think he's a very unique voice that, if you haven't checked out his channel, you definitely should, because he does like watch-alongs, and people vote with national selections, and he watched like all of the Eurovisions. Yeah, he's doing some really cool stuff. But yeah, like, I would never try and do things at the level that he does because I just don't have that knowledge. And there are certain musical terms that I've picked up, and there was a point in my life where I was DJing as part of a radio show that I did in college. So I'm not like a novice when it comes to music, but at the same time, like just responding to the songs on their own can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. But yeah, so expect a Festival de Canção video in the last week. So before it happens, that's when I'm going to be doing that. And then we'll also be doing a Melodifestivalen video too. Hello, sorry, I'm going to do my best to pronounce her name. Albigato. Gibrasi was my favorite of the 2021 NF season that didn't go through to ESC. I really like that song. I think it was called Where Do You Want to Go? Yeah, that was really nice. Hello to Rocky Sweden. Melodifestivalen is top notch. I agree in some regards. I have to say that so far, I haven't found many songs that I'm going to be, well, I haven't found any songs that I'm going to be listening to afterwards. My favorite so far has been Jacqueline. That is the only one that seems like, that's, I mean, I don't even think it presents itself as a strong candidate for winner, but in terms of how it looks, how it sounds, the kind of music that it is, that it's got a bit of a funk aspect to it, I'm all for that. And that would be my choice for Melfest so far. Of course, we still need to see the other two semifinals, and the conversation right now is focused around Dani Saucedo and Marcus and Martinez. So we'll see. And yeah, Chile ESC. Many of the NFs are not just about winning, but gaining audience in the home country. That's why televote matters. And actually, many of those countries that have 60-40 or 70-30, etc., do quite well in ESC so far. Because these ratio splits, where the televote has a lot more power, we haven't really seen that many. Well, we haven't seen that many of them. As from what I can tell, I mean, others who have been following national selections for a longer period of time would have more detail on that. But like in my very first national selection season, which was 2020, it was either 50-50 or 100% televote. And then in 2021, that's when we saw that ratio change in UMK. And even this year, they had only made the shift in Melody Grand Prix to 60-40. But I agree with what you're saying as far as the shows. What we're seeing a lot of them try to do is to make themselves an event in their own right. And I know that Benidorm Fest has talked about this a lot. That it was even, I was talking about this with Sonia, who joined me for the Croatia video earlier this week. That Raiven, who, if you saw Benidorm Fest in 2022, you know that he competed and finished in 4th. He was part of the selection committee, and during the week of Benidorm Fest, he was in what's it called, a press conference, and there are a lot of people talking about songs with the Eurovision sound, and he said, we need to abandon this idea of a Eurovision sound and start looking towards what's a Benidorm Fest sound, because they don't have to be the same. Like ultimately, we should be getting the entire country excited and involved in what we're doing, and then still focus on Eurovision, but that like there's a reason for us to be working towards both. Olympic Song Contest. Zorra as a show sucks. Lots of love from Croatia. Yeah, but the production is pretty weak, and not only in the kind of problems that we talked about earlier, but even just the composition of the show, the elements, it's not the worst. And I don't want to be too judgmental about that, because there are a lot of layers to this. To use an example, everybody complains about Ireland. I did a section of a video where I wanted to specifically address what the problems are in Ireland, but a lot of people direct their anger and frustration at Michael Keeley. But I don't think that's fair. I think that there are a lot of steps in the process that lead to the result that we see, and you can still talk about it as it being a problem for how it serves Eurovision, but you don't necessarily need to direct that towards individuals, because that is then you're putting an impetus on them that is an impetus. Is that no? Well, you're kind of directing things onto one person when obviously it's not just about what they do, it's also about the budget that they're given, the resources and facilities that are available to them. And addressing those problems shouldn't necessarily be a reflection on that individual specifically. It should be a reflection of the organization, the broadcaster as a whole, and hopefully it's motivation for them to do better. This is Harry. If you guys, some of you might know Eurovox. Harry hosts a podcast. He does a lot of incredible work for them. He says, "What's kind of you to match the color scheme to your dog?" It's true. I've never really thought of that. But so this is Charlotte back here, just gnawing away on the phone. She is adorable. Yeah. Anyway, it's these kind of things that you observe. Rocky Sweden, curious, have you been looking at the Eurovision odds? If you could place a bet on any country, would be the best bang for your buck? Not that I'm a gambler. I mean, so yes, I actually have the odds open here just in case anybody was going to bring it up. I would like to believe that we don't have a winner yet. I might be wrong about that. What I'm leaning towards right now is Italy. And I haven't done a video, I haven't done any videos on Italy yet this year, which is a shame because Sanremo is always a top-notch festival. This Sanremo was one of the best, in my opinion. Normally I get like 8 or 9 songs from Sanremo that go into my library and I'm listening to forever. This year I had 13, which is twice as many as I have from Eurovision itself, not including national selections when talking about the songs that have actually won. But yeah, loved Sanremo. And specific to Angelina Mango and La Noia, the reason why I'm leaning more towards that one is because it's a song with character that's energetic and a performer with a lot of personality. And the only area of doubt that I have is that we know that sometimes Italy struggles with staging. It hasn't been as much of the case in the recent years. I think that they've made a lot of good decisions when it's come to how they've staged their entries, but it's still like an area of doubt. And I would be highly in favor of another Italian win. I know that after how the production went for the Turin show, that might not be welcomed by everyone, but ultimately we're talking about the song. And I think that song would be great. And of course we have Ukraine. I wouldn't be opposed to a Ukrainian win. I think the song is great. It is one of my favorites. It's hard not to think about the ramifications of another Ukrainian win, not only from the logistical point of view, because nothing is suggesting that we'll be in Ukraine by 2025, though I would love that. And obviously, in order for that to happen, the war needs to end, and this war should end like right now. However, that's not presenting itself as a likely option so far. And obviously, planning needs to start right after Eurovision in May this year. So if it doesn't happen in the next few months, then we won't be going to Kyiv most likely, or maybe there are other Ukrainian cities. But yeah, there's that side of it. But then there's also the unfortunate conversation that surrounds that, and it's going to be happening before the show, because we've now seen that Ukraine can pull in record-breaking televotes, and I could do like a 2-hour video on that. So I'll just leave the conversation there. But we are sometimes, as much as we're all like, yeah, Ukraine, they should be independent, and Russia should stop their aggression against them. We are not always the kindest to Ukraine when it comes to Eurovision, and I hope that people keep that in mind. DK, what is your puppy saying about her? What about you, Sanremo? She'd probably just be like, I don't know how to answer that in a way that is funny or entertaining. So, Muffin Chips, curious as to what happens in Sanremo if Loredana wins, because she's performing the same song she went to Sanremo with, and I'm pretty sure that's against ESC rules. I don't think it is, actually. I don't recall there being anything in Eurovision's rules. Sometimes there are rules in national selections that they're like exclusive rights to whatever you enter with. And it does surprise me that Sanremo doesn't have that. It could be that those exclusive rights only exist until after Sanremo happens. But yeah, I don't think that's a Eurovision rule. And also, according to my Italian friends, they seem pretty convinced that it's going to happen, that Loredana is going to be the winner, which is very interesting. And I keep asking them, like, what, because she won the jury vote or the Sala Stampa in Sanremo, and I keep asking my friends from Italy, like, what is it that they see in that song and performance? And the consistent response that I've got is, I don't know, they just love her. And like, I suppose that there's something compelling about a 70-year-old woman with dyed blue hair singing like a punk rock, kind of punkish. It's not punk rock, but it's like in that territory, singing that kind of song. And like, hey, I'm here for it. It wouldn't be the worst thing that San Marino has chosen. Hopstadtjack. Hopstadtjack. As a Swede here, Melodifestivalen is a bigger event than Eurovision. Yes, and that it explains a lot about the kind of songs that get included. Yes, and I've been catching up with Melodifestivalen in between like the Super Saturdays. And yeah, like it's interesting because you see these songs that come up and they are reminiscent of songs that we've seen in the past, and when you see them, you kind of know, like, okay, this isn't going to qualify, but what else is there? What else are the qualities? And so it's quite clear to me that when they're making the selection of songs and they're putting together the heats, they're thinking about that. They're thinking about having certain boxes be ticked for every year, which isn't necessarily a problem, because again, it's a first and foremost a show for Sweden's audience, and if those are the songs that the audience responds to the most, then there's a reason for including them, even if they aren't necessarily competitive for the end goal, which is choosing the Eurovision song. Let's see. Lisa saying, I have to confess, I didn't watch ESC for years before last year, and yes, thus, and so on. And this year doesn't encourage me to watch it anymore. Yeah, like I said, I've had a hard time being motivated for a variety of reasons, but yeah, like, hey, if it's not your thing, then there's no reason to force yourself. Like, I'm of the mindset that everybody should give Eurovision a chance. Unlike those of you who are tuning in who come from participating countries, like, in Canada, we don't grow up with Eurovision. We, of course, know who Celine Dion is, but if you don't know what Eurovision is, then you don't know about the fact that she won. To us, like, she is, one of our most talented singers with an enormous legacy of hits and commercial hits. She's just like, she's known so much for her voice, and also, like, she's such a character too. She's parodied a million times, and usually, like, the parodies are they're affectionate. So I feel like overall people have a lot of respect for her. But yeah, like, for that reason, it's really interesting. Where is I going with this? Yeah, so you're talking about how you don't feel compelled to watch it. It's interesting for me as an outsider because when I speak to people from Europe, everybody has an opinion on Eurovision, but not everybody likes it, of course. And I feel like for people who have not been exposed to it in the same way, it's still something worth observing, whether you think the music is good or not, because there's so much about Eurovision, and I feel like a lot of people, when they describe it, they kind of minimize it. Like, even the description of it being like the gay Olympics, I see why they say that, but it's not just that. It's also geopolitical uh, conflict to say, not in the same way, but it's a demonstration of democracy, and nowadays that we're talking about these entries that are politically loaded, and in the example of the expected Israeli song, and how it's playing into the politics of nowadays. It's very interesting to see people be like, this is bad, this shouldn't be allowed because it's political. And in my mind, it's like, no, it's not because it's political. We see politics all through Eurovision, even though the idea is that, you know, we don't allow politics. It's so not the case. It's what is this saying right now, and how is it going to be reflected onto the world? But yeah, anyway, lots more comments to get to. So sorry, as you can see, I go on a lot of tangents, and one of the reasons why I like doing videos the way that I do is because I can kind of keep myself focused. DK saying Torino was fine. Spent 2 weeks there in the press center, and it was wonderful. I was in Torino as well. Torino, beautiful city. Absolutely loved it. And yeah, I would be happy to go back or to go to another city because I really enjoyed my time there. Olivia A saying, I like the Ukrainian song, but I don't think it screams winner, and I'm not sure if it has wide appeal. I would agree with your first point. I think that it does have wide appeal, especially because when we're talking about Aliona, she is recognized internationally, not like at a massive level, but I know people who are like really into music in various ways who know Aliona, almost at the level of like Daha Braha, where it's just before the war started, she was somebody who was able to get her name out there. She was featured in I want to say Time magazine and or the New York Times. It was like a really big publication that and maybe that was what kind of brought her to public consciousness. But like I'll see people who, you know, don't necessarily, who aren't Ukrainian and don't follow national selections, sharing like stories with Aliona's music playing in the background. So I think that that will help in some way. Gonzalo, hello to you. I mean, the Irish delegation has no responsibility over the Late Late Show's sounds, but they're responsible for using it thrice in a row. Yes. And I've always been of the mindset that if you can't put on a selection that comes close to what we're going to expect at Eurovision, then you might as well do an internal selection. And I understand, like, you know, doing that means that you don't include the public, and if you still do that and fail, then, you know, you'll still face criticism. But like, obviously there's been a lot of complaints about Dora. At least with Dora, what they're putting on is in its own dedicated studio. It's comes close in some ways to what we can expect with Eurovision. I think that the big thing that they're missing, and I don't know, it's possible that they do have this and they're just not using it fully, but automated mixing, like QPilot or Live Edit. Some of you might have seen that for very technical performances. And to use an example, Sasha Jean-Baptiste from Sweden, you can find videos online where they show a script of shots, and they'll show the video itself, and then they'll show how the script is processing all the shots that are predetermined. And yeah, and in order to do that, you usually need robotic cameras, like mostly robotic cameras. Obviously, you know, you still have somebody who's using the Steadicam on stage, but yeah, like I don't think that Dora has that, and I think that if they were able to do that, and then, you know, maybe introduce more automation, then they might be able to get that aspect down a little bit better. Baltic. Honestly, I love No Rules. It just has something going for it that makes me place it in my top one. Yeah, and look, I've seen a lot of people be like, we just want to have fun, so we sent the entry that was the most fun. And when we're talking about UMK this year, I can't necessarily disagree with that. My issue is that at the end of the day, it's going to be read as a gimmicky entry, and I especially now because this year we're looking at a lot of people that, for lack of a better term, seem to be trying to go for the Karya effect. I'm not sure if that's going to be as successful as people think it will be. Yeah, but at the end of the day, like what you like. If it gives you life, then that's all that matters. And yeah, Vilnius, hello to you. Just wanted to compliment your content. Thank you very much. I feel like you're the most professional ESC commentator out there. It's very kind of you. There are others that are very professional, even ones who have done who have actually worked behind the scenes at Eurovision. Jan Bors is a good example. He was the Czech head of delegation. But I appreciate that compliment. Thank you so much. It's not how you always use data to support your opinions. Keep it up. Thank you. So yeah, when with my videos, what I wanted to do from the outset was, you know, to not just make it about me. Obviously, like when I'm excited about something, I talk about it. I talk about how excited I am about it and how much I appreciate things. I full on said last year, like, yeah, I hope that Blanca Paloma wins with Ayaya, because it's a beautiful song that has impacted me at a deep emotional level. Obviously, that didn't happen, and yeah, like yeah. So you know, I give time for what to recognize what I think is good and strong and competitive. But I also wanted to not just make it about myself and you know, speak to the broader community when doing national selections, to try and find locals that I can speak to. This year I was able to do that with three of the national selections, but with 4 individuals, 2 from Spain, 1 from Ukraine, 1 from Croatia, and there might be some more coming. I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, thank you so much for your comments. Olivia, any thoughts on Luktelk by Silvester Belt? Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. It is currently my favorite. And yeah, I have high hopes for it. I do think that it could land in the top 10. But you know, we only have half the song, so who's to say? Are you going to Malmo yourself? Yes. Obviously, there are other obstacles that need to be overcome. Last year, I was actually very surprised that I got press accreditation. You know, because I think at the time that I applied, my channel was just under 1,000 subscribers. And you know, they don't necessarily give you all the details for how they arrive at those decisions. But I was thinking that I was just going to have to find a plan B, and I didn't. But I also know that what happened the year before doesn't necessarily guarantee what happens this year, and they might have to, for you know, on SVT's part, for whatever the logistical reasons are, they might have to not allow as many people this year. But I'm definitely going to be trying to do that, and yeah, I'm covering Eurovision as best as I can on the ground. Vincent, I'd like to know what Stu listens to outside of the Eurovision season. Lots of things. Lately, I like to describe my musical upbringing as being in dance music, but mostly trance. And it's interesting because for a lot of people, like, trance does not have a very good reputation, or it hasn't for a long time. But nowadays that we're hitting that nostalgia cycle of the 2000s, we're seeing a lot more songs that resemble trance in pop music and at Eurovision. And I was a very big advocate of how that came through in Tattoo last year, which, like, it's not a trance song on its own, but the production and all of that is very reminiscent of that, whether they were trying to do something like that or if it's just how they stumbled upon it. Because you know, Lorene's music is very synthetic. It has been since since about like 2015. Well, I mean, even before that, when with her first single, the first album, with her first album, it was really like it was much more in like the EDM house, big room house kind of territory. But then, yeah. Anyway, sorry, tangent. So that's one thing. And lately, what I've been doing is I've been listening to old episodes of Armin van Buuren's A State of Trance, which has actually really been it's really changed my impressions of what I thought trance was back then when I was very young. There are a lot of songs that I didn't really know back then. But you know, I have all kinds of sources for music. I try and be up to date with the Canadian scene, which there's a lot of very interesting Canadian music. Canadian media struggles to compete, unfortunately, with a handful of exceptions. I do not think that we're going to be getting this Canadian Song Contest or Eurovision Canada, whatever they're calling it. But yeah. But honestly, in terms of styles of music, I'm literally open to everything. There are very few genres that I would be like, this is not completely for me, and I love the idea of, you know, kind of mixing genres, doing things that present themselves as new. Hobsta's Shack. I'm sorry for not getting your name right if that's the case. Is there a reason that a capital city has not held Eurovision since 2017, or is it just a series of coincidences? We talked about this actually, not on this channel, but back when I was still part of Eurovox, we actually talked about this when the city of Malmo was announced, and my opinion is that it's an example of how competitive it can be to get the host city to host the host city, get the capital city to be the host, because you know, like, there are a lot of global events, and the issue with Stockholm was that there were like Taylor Swift concerts. The football teams didn't want to be relocated to accommodate for Eurovision. Yeah, it's I think that it comes down to the fact that it's just very competitive. And when we're talking about these, you know, cities that are large but not necessarily the largest, they'll usually have venues that are more accommodating or more appropriate for what Eurovision is looking for nowadays, because they're not really doing the massive arenas. It's more like the ones that would be used for like basketball or volleyball, hockey, those kinds of sports where you don't need quite as large of a space. Because yeah, like M&S Bank and uh, Bala Altipor, was that the one in Turin? When you're inside them, they're not super big. They're you know, obviously you can still get lots of people in there, to up to tens of thousands, but it's not yeah, not like the really big ones that we were seeing in the 2000s and the early 2010s. So yeah, that's my opinion. Oh, thank you, Danilo. It was Rolling Stone that wrote about Aliana. Uh, oh, this is interesting. Someone in Croatia tweeted that Dora has Q Pilot this year, but they don't know how to use it properly. That's a shame. There's a there's a French director. I think his is live edit. But I'm sure that if they invited him, he would you know, offer them a bit of training and education. But yeah, that's too bad. Hello to Cobra Blue. Absolutely love your videos. You're my favorite ESC YouTuber. Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Yeah, that's very kind of you to say. That's all. That's all I can respond with. Victoire, when Ukraine wins, Canada should host. That, I mean, obviously, you know, nobody would say no to that. What I do want to say is that last year when Zarra was participating, there were some pieces in Canadian media about her participation. Obviously, there was a point at which she was also included in the winner buzz, and that didn't materialize. And yeah, so that it kind of leads. It feeds the cycle, right? Like when people hear, "Oh, France could win," then all of a sudden the local media jump on it. And there, with one of the articles, it was in the CBC, and they were talking to, I believe the director of production. There's somebody at a very high level in the CBC, and they were saying that if Canada were ever invited to participate, we would have to, you know, we'd have to consider how expensive it is to host. And like, obviously, they don't know things at the level that we do, because, you know, when we talk about Australia and the possibility of Australia winning, we know that they wouldn't be able to host in Australia. And I imagine it would be the very same with Canada, even though Canada is still very close. It would just be way too expensive for the delegations. Like not international, a transatlantic flight is at like a base rate nowadays is about 1,200. I've very rarely paid less than 900. Sorry, like 900 Canadian, which would be 700, 600 euros, and that's like, you know, economy class, you know, crammed in there. And so if people are looking to give their artists a bit more comfort, then it would cost a lot more than that. Also, they have to fly over like sometimes 20 people or more. I'd be very curious to see who has the largest delegation. But anyway, yes, I would love that. Probably wouldn't happen. But what was interesting is that we actually have seen a lot of Ukrainian talent come over, and I know that there's been a big push since the war to you know, promote Ukrainian culture. But I was very happy to get to see Go A live at a free concert outside in 2022. Yeah, in 2022, and they've come over another time since then. So I'm really happy about that. Mark, yes, I am no longer with Eurobox, but they're still very good friends of mine. I love that team. For someone who may want to make ESC content in the future, have any advice? Ooh. I would say the best thing you can do, and I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of borrowing this advice from Alicia Michelle, who obviously a lot of people know and love. To try and find what you can offer that nobody else offers. Um, and it's not an easy thing to do. And I see a lot of people kind of default on, you know, lots of people do reactions. I'm going to do a reaction. You know, the kind of cold reaction where you put on the video and you talk about the qualities. And if that's what you want to do, then that's fine. But just know that a lot of people do that. And like one thing that people don't really talk about enough is that those are easy grabs at views, because it's the first thing that people think about. They're like, oh, well, what are other people thinking about the song? So they type in blah, 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 reaction. And even on my videos, even though they're not reactions, when I see in my analytics the search terms that bring people to my videos, often reaction comes up a lot. And yeah, like the reason why they're preferenced so much is because they're a very easy way to get views. And so like if that's your jam, like I want to have this many subscribers and this many views and all that, then by all means. I'm not trying to do that. I want to follow the story. I want to have a proper conversation with people. And I don't think that doing content in that way, for me, would be contributing to Eurovision in an effective way. But there are lots of people who do it fairly well. Lisa saying, even if we don't have the same faves, I do appreciate your thorough analysis. Maybe I should be reading these compliments first, because I don't need to be putting them up and being like, oh yeah, everybody loves you. But thank you. Very two difficult words, a little tipsy. What have you been drinking? And are you, tell me where you're from. My guess, based on the lettering in your name, is that you're from Lithuania. Sorry, no, Finland. But tell me where you're from. Menkinder asking, what's your story into Eurovision? Where did your journey start? So officially it started in 2018. Before that, I had come across some performances. I remember, I think the very first song that I watched was Alexander Rybak, Fairy Tale. I don't remember how I came across that, but it was around the time that it won. So like 2009, I would have been 18 years old, and then of course like Epic Sax Guy. So like I had these like brief mentions of Eurovision popping up, and when I was working at the CBC, I worked on an entertainment program, and they would do segments about Eurovision. Like this was in talk radio, and our talk radio is very not politically driven, because that sounds a bit incorrect, but it's about current affairs. And so it was an arts and culture and entertainment show, but they would talk about it from that kind of angle. And so when I was there in 2015 and 2016, there were segments on Eurovision. So I was hearing about it and hearing them talk about it, and then like also hearing my colleagues talk about it, and they would usually say those reductive things like yeah, it's the gay Olympics, the music's trash, but it's a big show, and all the voting is political and all that. And then when I was living in Spain in 2018, then I saw it for myself, and I understood what they were talking about, but they left out certain details, like the fact that like it is very high-end television, very high-end. There are not very many shows that do what Eurovision does. I mean, really, there's no show that does what Eurovision does on its own, but there are like we are seeing more elaborate visual shows, and I think that Eurovision has in some ways been a pioneer in that regard, and that's like a testament to the program. And so like it stuck with me, and then the following year I went back to Canada, and I started getting those recommendations, and then so I started following it even closer. Then it was part of Eurobox up until late last year. I started this late 2022, and now I'm here. So that's my story. What is left from countries that are yet to pick that could realistically dethrone Italy? Because I think she might walk the grand final easily. I would like to believe that that's true. This is like something that I haven't seen anybody talk about, and it could mean absolutely nothing. But I remember over the summer, Taya from Taya and Selena, who is a songwriter and has participated in songwriting camps, said very confidently that she believes if Switzerland goes with the song that she thinks they're going with, that Switzerland could be winning Eurovision. Now, obviously, that's a very big statement. We have seen other people make statements about songs that didn't even come close in the past, but it was something that I wasn't even thinking about until maybe yesterday. I remember, I actually, I don't remember what had made me remind it. Maybe I was just thinking about winner potential and what people are focusing on right now. So yeah, that is one that I'm going to keep my eye out for. I have to say, as much as people are excited about Croatia, I don't think it's winning. I'm very happy for Croatia to have something competitive, and I do agree that this is competitive. But not only is it obvious that the jury appeal is not all the way there, it's also I think that the song as on its own, it depends a little bit too much on the hook. And don't get me wrong, the hook is great. The hook is super infectious. It's one of the best qualities. It's also not like it's not all the song has. The fact that there is this commentary about young people feeling like they need to leave their country because they well for whatever reasons. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but yeah, like it's not a one-dimensional song. However, I don't think that it on its own, I don't think that it serves enough to get full jury support. But I would love to see Croatia get a very good result, top 5, something like that. I understand that for the juries, it makes sense that they all give equal votes, but is it really fair that for the televote, San Marino gets as many points as Germany? Should that be changed? Well, the way that I look at it is that with Eurovision and how they do the 50-50, between each country, it shouldn't be looked at as like we also have to clarify something about San Marino, but it shouldn't be looked at in a way where people in a country that have less of a population have more power than people in another country, because at the end of the day, you're putting the songs in an order. I think it would be more of an argument if like it was physical votes that had like more power than the physical votes in another country. But in this case, the scoring in Eurovision is fixed. It's always the same number. And therefore, it's really just trying to find an order of what the preference is. And that's always the same. So no, I don't necessarily agree with that. But what we have to clarify with San Marino is that San Marino doesn't yet have proper televoting. Before the voting change last year, they used an aggregate result in order to generate the televote. And now I think that they still, because I believe it was determined that in the semifinal, in semifinal 2 last year, they used San Marino's jury vote, because now that's the rule. If the televote is unable to produce to meet a certain threshold, and yeah, like it can't be used, so then they use the jury vote as a backup. So yeah, in the case of San Marino, it doesn't necessarily apply, but then you also have other countries that have much smaller populations, Malta, Iceland. But yeah, like again, we're trying to find an order of what the preference is, and I think that keeping that fixed is ideal. If any of you saw the video that I did where I did like a deep dive into the jury system, my belief is that there should be more countries within the individual rankings getting points, because when the system was introduced, it was 19 countries participating, and now we have 26. And when you only give points to the top 10, then the bottom 16 don't get any points, even though people are voting for them. And it could be like, if the votes are really spread, then you could be disregarding tens of thousands, possibly even hundreds of thousands of votes. So I think it should at least move to a top 15. And they can do that in a way where they still keep it at 12 points, so that 12 points is still part of the branding, and so on and so forth. Oh, this is interesting. I recall that the 2021 rules talking about limiting the delegation to 20 people, implying that it was even more previously. HOT team, artists, news reporters, styles, vocal coaches, choreographers, it adds up. Yeah, I mean, they probably have limitations on the delegations. In 2021, you have to remember as well that that was the first like proper Eurovision going into COVID. So that might have been why there was a hard number. And I mean, like 20 people already is a lot when you consider. I mean, if let's say that you're using the maximum allowed performers on stage, which would be 6, then you'd have 14 other people. Obviously, you need the head of delegation, staging director. Sometimes that has been the same person. In the case of very small teams, but yeah, like the what do you call that? What's the general word for that? Hair and wardrobe, I suppose. Um, you might have a lighting technician, head of press. Head of press is usually a pretty consistent one. But yeah, like all those things. So like 20 is you could build a really, really robust team with 20 people. Olivia, Belgium are a front runner. For me, the song is so polished and Mustii is experienced. I like Belgium. I think that I liked the description that I saw of it being kind of like a mishmash between arcade and Rise Like a Phoenix, in the sense that it has this Bond theme kind of feel to it. My opinion, excuse me, my opinion about Belgium is that it's a bit of a slow burner, and I think for that reason it's not going to get a ton of. Well, I mean, it might do really well in the televote if it's really good on stage, but I don't think it's going to be, top 2, top 3 with the televote in order for it to get a win. And also, I want to root for Olly Alexander from the UK, my country, as he's a fantastic performer. So excited to hear the rest of the song. I haven't yet heard the snippet. I try to keep myself limited to just the actual song in full. I mean, as far as him as an artist, I really love the song King. And I've heard a few other songs of his, and I think that there's definitely a lot of promise there. I know that obviously there's this big expectation with the UK to be back in the game, and I was kind of teasing Harry about about how that didn't materialize last year. But yes, I think that the signs that are presenting themselves right now for the UK are positive. Um, Alejandro, everybody assumes Zorra will do bad because of the jury, but it's not hard for me to imagine something like 6th in the televote, 19th in the jury, and 7th or 8th overall. The song has been the most viral so far. I agree with that. I think that's a pretty safe bet, I have to say. It's not going to be a jury favorite by any means. My hope is that they will acknowledge the kind of instantness of it, because it is a very I consider this to be a very well made and written song. It has a lot of simplicity to it, but it's very well made and written from a musical point of view, from a lyrical point of view. Obviously, the lyrics are not going to be fully understood by the jury or the televote, but there is a lot of merit to the song. And I know that a lot of people are going to dismiss it because the performers are not the youngest, and we've talked about that, about how there's this inherent bias for young and fresh out of high school and all of that. But yeah, I like your guess, and I hope that it happens. I would love to see lower end top 10. If not, then like left hand side, because Nebulossa are great. They are great people. It actually made me think of something as well. That one thing I've noticed about this year is that we are seeing certain artists with experience, and so far we can include Zorra in there, or like experience. Artists who are not like the fresh out of high school type. We're seeing some of them in the national selections that could be selected. Obviously, Constracta is an option for Serbia. I watched a very interesting video. I need to maybe find that and share the link of it, that try to interpret the song. Obviously, Constracta is a real artiste, TM, and doesn't address things in a concrete way to be like, this is what the song is about. But it was very interesting to hear all the different interpretations. There's a potential political angle. There's a potential, Eurovision specific angle. She one thing that she has said is that it is sort of a part 2 of Incorpore Sano, and it makes that very clear from the very beginning of the song, where before she was talking about not having access to healthcare, and then it opens with her addressing the doctor. So I have so much love for Constracta, and I hope I know that there are other choices in Serbia, but I just want her to come back. Hey, Eurovision history. Some of you probably know him as well. Love your videos. Do you think Slimane can win for France? Possibly. We saw a really, really, really powerful performance of his in Dora this week, and I imagine that some of you have seen it already. If you haven't, then definitely check it out on their channel. I think it would probably be a compromise winner. I don't think it's going to be like the Salvador Sobral, this is the clear favorite. But yeah, and I wasn't so sure about that when it was the only song, which is like, I think unless you have something that is literally the best song on earth, to be so confident and be like, yeah, this is the song that's going to win Eurovision. Yeah, I wasn't so sure at the beginning, but as time has gone on, he's definitely in contention for a very good result, possibly even jury winner. We'll have to see. Olivia A. This might be controversial, but I think if Spain had picked Jorge Gonzalez, they'd have a better chance with the televote, even though the song was a bit tacky. The song was tacky, the staging was tacky. I don't disagree with the appeal. I think that yes, they probably could have gotten it. Well, it hasn't happened yet, so it is possible that could have delivered a better result. How do I even address this? Because it's hypothetical. Anyway, I'm just happy that they didn't, because none of that song represents Spain. It represents, as I told one commenter, it represents a mishmash of Latin lover stereotypes, and it was very heavily banking on the idea of I'm hot and sexy in order to sell itself. Because yeah, I don't think that song was much to write about. Muffin Chips. Cha 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 was also not a jury song, but juries know what the fandom is rooting for, and I don't want to look like they're completely out of touch and still manage to land in the top 5. I don't think that the juries really consider the fans that much. I don't think there's a reason to, because I think the reason why Cha 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 did as well as it did was because it had impact. It was unmistakable, and the people who voted for it highly appreciated the show that it was, and it was a show. The people who voted, who put it in the lower end of their rankings, probably felt more strongly about the end of it, where he's out of breath, he's missing the notes, and he looks uncomfortable, which negatively impacts the performance. And obviously, it doesn't matter for everyone, and it's those kind of things where, like, I think that is an example of why the jury matters. I don't think that you can justify a performance like that could have got more jury votes. And when you consider the fact that Cha 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 came fourth over songs that were considered to be more obvious with their jury appeal, Estonia, Spain, France, so on and so forth, Armenia, like, choose whatever you think that should be. That says that it was recognized in a good way. Could it have got more jury points? Yes, definitely. I would have loved to have seen even the total points be like, I don't know. It would have been so great if it was like Loreen won by 3 points, or even Karia wins by 3 points. Anything like that. That would have been a fantastic outcome. But yeah, I don't think the fans consider it too much. But I think that maybe people are are a little more in tune nowadays, because Eurovision is growing. Maybe people are a little bit more in tune with where the focus is going. So yeah, those are just my thoughts. Hello to Vaiji. I don't know how to pronounce your name, and you got a little Pikachu. How cute. What do you think the televote only semi mean for the contest? Will they stay, and what does that mean for the future of Eurovision and the jury televote balance? So I think that the best possible outcome from having televote only semifinals is that it could, in some ways, improve the the retention, not the retention, but by having songs that the audience likes more in the grand final, it could mean that that will translate into viewership. That you know, the people who were hoping to see that song in the final stick around. It is hard to say how the semifinals impact the viewership on the night of the final, other than the fact that when we're talking about the local audience, if their song doesn't qualify, then the numbers always drop pretty consistently. And that's one of the reasons why there's a big five, because those markets have huge, huge potential for viewership. And if they miss out, then viewership goes down by a lot. One observation that was made early in 2020, sorry, late in 2022, when this announcement was made, was that the effect in the final is that there are fewer songs for the jury to give points to that they would normally give to. And look at what happened. I mean, yes, it was Loreen who was the first one to as I said in that one comment, be up to bat. Excuse me. But yeah, that is a potential consequence of like, and you know, we only have 1 year to use as an example, but the idea that there aren't as many songs that have heavier jury support competing in the grand final, that could mean that the jury points are more concentrated. Maybe in the future it won't be around 1 song like it was last year. Maybe it will be around 2 or 3. But yeah, and that could mean that the jury points are have a greater impact on the winner. So maybe if that ends up being a consistent thing, then they'll have to go back to putting the juries in the semifinals, which from an outside point of view might seem like for people who don't understand it at that level, it might seem like the opposite of what they're trying to do, because obviously we know that people complain about the juries all the time. But yeah, I'll very briefly summarize this because I did the full story of it, but I heard mentions about this, about Eurovision at many points in my life and my professional life as well. Then I went to live in Spain, saw it for myself, saw that it was not all that it was described to be, and I saw a lot of positives in it. And then, yeah, it just kind of stuck with me, and here I am. Danilo saying, I guess this year is going to be Jamal Duncan Lawrence kind of result when the jury televote are too divisive. Well, the interesting thing about, in the case of Jamala, it was a bit more extreme because we had a lot of jury support for Australia and Ukraine, and then a lot of televote support for Russia that year. With Duncan Lawrence's win, we saw more of a spread on both sides because yes, like kind of were the televote winners, but they didn't win by like that much of a margin. So yeah, like that is possible. I'm of the opinion that that makes Eurovision more interesting. I don't think that you have to give the win to the song that is the most popular with the public just for that sake. And the justification that I use for this is that when we're talking about other areas of entertainment, you don't give, like, just to use a movie example, you don't give the award for Best Picture to the highest grossing movie. The movie being the highest grossing movie is an achievement on its own, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it had the most artistic merit. It can. Sometimes it can be the same thing, but it doesn't. You don't need to just say, okay, you're the best. Anyway, that's what I think. Antoine asking, how would you rate Slovenia's chances to qualify this year? I think they're pretty good. It's hard to say because I don't remember too much about how the semifinals are split and what their allies are. But in watching Raiven's performance, I don't know if she goes by Raiven or Raiven, but I'll say Raiven because I guess that makes the most sense with the animal. I saw her performance at Dora last night, and what I liked about it was that you can see very clearly in all of her performances that she pays a lot of attention to her aesthetic. And like, firstly, she looked beautiful, and you know that there's also this kind of like, you know, supernatural witch or creature kind of idea to it. Excuse me, sorry. There's a lot of things going on right now. Anyway, the point is, I think that they're pretty good. I think that the song is very interesting. I was talking with a friend yesterday, and in the acoustic performance, he was saying like I like the song, but it doesn't really go anywhere musically. And I think it's the kind of example of a song that depends a lot on modern technology in order to have its appeal. You know, the soundscape, the synths, all the kind of digital sides of it. And I think that that's kind of like what some people were complaining about last year with Tattoo, about it not being like the most musically developed, which is fine, but that's just one area of it. It doesn't address where the arc is in the song, what the performer brings to it, and obviously, you know, we know that Loreen is a one of a kind performer, and also like all the technology that went into it, which in my opinion was one of the biggest areas of its appeal. So. Victoire, have you reacted to Joost Klein? Reacted in the sense of talked about. I'm very interested to see what he's bringing because uh, his sound is somewhat reminiscent of like happy hardcore. I know that he does a lot of different kinds of things, and with Dutch music, the Dutch have obviously contributed a lot to electronic music, especially trance and house. And I think it will be very interesting to see. It might be a bit too much in the Karya territory, maybe, but it's one I'm excited for it. I'm more excited for it than I am skeptical. Olivia, hey, this discussion reminds me of Azerbaijan 2022 going through with no televote points. Yeah, I mean, that happens. It look, it sucks, but I think I still would have taken that over. Oh, what were the other things from that year? Yeah, I mean that was the only time that happened. That a song qualified just on jury points and 0 televote points. But yeah, chill at ESC. Which songs will you analyze, react to, and how do you choose a song if you only do some? So it comes down to what I can say and if I think it has value. There have been a few that I've written and haven't been able to make just because I haven't had the time to do it. Each video usually requires a number of hours. If I had to say like there's a minimum, I think the fastest that I've ever done a video would probably be 5, which is already like a lot. But yeah, it comes down to a number of factors. I just don't want to put something out there if I don't think that I have enough to say about it. So what I'll tell you for now is that I would like to do a video about Italy and Finland. Obviously, there are some that we haven't seen selected yet that could be ones to talk about. Ukraine would be another one to talk about as well. But yeah, and the challenge comes down to, as I was kind of saying earlier, where I'm not as knowledgeable about music as some other people are. So although I do my best when trying to talk about musical features, I prefer to talk about performances that I've seen, be made for television, because then I can be a bit more concrete in what I'm talking about, what the impact is on screen. But yeah, we'll see. I do my best. And what I will be doing is I'll do sort of like a recap of the year. It's almost like the selection reviews that I do. It will be looking at Eurovision like that. And last year, I think I talked about like half of the songs, yeah, in some level of detail. But yeah, and I'm going to make an effort to do more videos in the preseason in between when national selections end and when Eurovision begins, because I didn't do as many as I wanted to last year. Hello to Burke. What did you think about Sanremo this year? I thought it was fantastic. I did talk about this a little bit already, but yeah, it was my favorite of what we've seen so far. And yeah, like to think of the songs that I'm listening to after the festival, I loved Darjan D'Amico's song. Obviously, our winner, Manoia, was great. Sinceramente, maybe I should probably go for artists because that would be easier. Mahmood, Big Mama, Santi Franceschi, Santi. Those guys, the two that had the big synth pop song. There are a few others. Was it Maniola Fiorello, the one with Mariposa? That one I really liked. I Sanremo, from a musical point of view, never disappoints me. I love, if Eurovision ever ends and Sanremo keeps going, I will just follow Sanremo, and that my life will be happy. Or if, like, let's say that I lose interest in Eurovision for some reason, then I will probably stay with Sanremo. How do you think the EBU should address the rising costs of the competition to ensure that more countries can participate? It's a good question. I don't know if there's a solution for that. Yeah, I don't think I have any valuable things to say about that, but it's something to think about. Gonzalo, Kaino is the only post-split tele winner not to hit the 300 tele points. Yes, in a 40-plus contest at that. Only 2 jury winners have hit 300 jury points. Yes, that's true, and it's a really good thing to point out, because the televote always sees big numbers at the top. The jury, it's usually much less, and so when people talk about, like, the when people are kind of complaining, oh, why should the jury have this much say? The televote has gotten their way a lot more, and they could continue to. I guess the reason why we're talking about how what's it called? How the televote semifinal only impact could have, what that impact could have on the grand final. That might end up shifting more towards the jury, and then maybe that could have serious consequences for how people perceive Eurovision. But yeah, it's something to keep in mind. Tietolina, nice to see you. Did you talk about Dora? Yes, we talked a bit about Dora. Technically has been a bit of a letdown, unfortunately. For as far as, like, who should win, I don't disagree that maybe Lasagna should win. I do question what its appeal would be, like how much of an appeal it would have at Eurovision. Obviously I think it could do really well in the televote. I don't think it would be enough to win, but potentially get top 5. And yeah, so I've been on for now an hour and 16 minutes, and I can feel myself getting a little bit lost in my words. So I think I am going to wrap it up there. But thank you so much for everybody who tuned in. I'm so surprised. We have 54 people currently, and yeah, that's not what I expected. Thank you so much. And I have to do my I only do it out of obligation, but if, let's say that you aren't subscribed to the channel, I would love to have you around so that we can chat a little bit more. I'll also do my best to do more live streams and talk to you directly. I've really enjoyed this, and I've been happy to see all the questions that have come my way. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Man, I'm really hungry. So, anyway, I'm going to stop rambling and let you all go on with your day. May your favorite songs win all their selections, and be kind to one another is another thing that I'm going to say, because I've been seeing the fandom become increasingly more tribalistic, and it doesn't need to be. We, all of us come to Eurovision out of love of something, and there's no reason to kind of tear down people for what they love. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you sometime soon. Bye.